Oh, howdy all, grab yourselves a beer, it is time for some Path of Exile discussion. Today, I wanted to talk about a large number of the replica unique items that have been found during the Heist League. And just pick out a few of the ones that I think are the coolest, but also show you where you can go and have a look at all of them. I'll say that I'm going to show a sampling of them at a whole variety of prices, from some of the cheapest ones up to two of the most chase items. In terms of where you find these though, so the Heist League included a lot of new uniques, and these replica uniques are unique items that are thematically based upon an existing unique item. So for instance, if you have a look at the replica Kongor's Undying Rage, you'll see that it has a number of stats in common with the original Kongor's Undying Rage, but there's enough change that it's functionally a very, very, very new item. And this is the standard for all of these. So Replica Iron Commander encourages a stacking of strength instead of stacking of dexterity. Otherwise, it's a very similar looking item. Now, in terms of the ones that jump out at me as the most interesting, not necessarily the best, but ones that I think are cool, I want to start with the Replica Tulfall. So Tulfall is a unique item that was introduced in the Breach League, and it comes from upgrading the Tullborn unique wand that drops in Cold Breaches with a Blessing of Tull, which drops from the boss of the Cold Breach. The original Tulfall is an item that was never particularly popular when it came out and hasn't aged all that well. The Replica, however, adds an interesting new mechanic that totally transforms how it would be used. So, the key differences here between the original Tulfall and the Replica are that instead of having a 50% chance to gain a power charge on killing a frozen enemy, you now have it on hitting one. So you're going to gain a lot more power charges as a result of this. Additionally, you have that drawback. Take 500 cold damage on reaching maximum power charges. Now normally that would be a mild drawback on an item, mild but meaningful. However, on this item, the way that it interacts with frenzy charges and power charges means that you're going to be cycling continually through these charges. So you're going to start, let's say that your power charge maximum is 5. You're going to spend 20% of your time at 0 charges, 20% at 1, 2, 3, and 4. As soon as you hit 5, you're going to lose all your power charges, you're going to take your 500 cold damage, and you're going to gain a frenzy charge instead. So you're going to spend your time with an average of 2 power charges. That's a considerable drawback compared to just using a normal weapon to generate, or some other source of generating power charges. But the benefit that you've got here, this taking 500 cold damage on reaching max power charges is something you can abuse. The way that you would abuse this is with cast when damage taken loops. So essentially, if you can cast a spell with the, if you can cause this to cast a spell every time that you reach maximum power charges, and that spell is inflicting some freezes, then there's a potential that you can get a loop going here. You're going to need to find a way to survive all this damage you're doing to yourself, and I can already hear the Twitch streamer Juices sort of chomping at the bit to figure out a way to make this work. These spellcast loops have definitely worked in the past. The unique ring Heartbound loop, which causes you to suffer 350 physical damage when one of your minions dies, has definitely been used a lot in the past. Additionally, using 2 of this Replica Tulfall at once is viable and is actually going to quadruple the speed of the loop, because it's going to mean that you go from a 50% chance to gain a power charge on hit of a frozen enemy to 100% chance, so double the power charge gain, but also you're taking double the cold damage on reaching maximum power charges. So that's going to mean overall about double the gain of spellcast. Sorry, about double the spellcasting. This is an interesting item. It's a build around me puzzle. Unfortunately, it seems to be fairly common, which means it should be fairly cheap to mess around with throughout the whole league. Next up, we have the Replica Cold Iron Point. And this is a straightforward power item with a bit of a twist. So Cold Iron Point, if you've never played around with it, it's very similar to this, except it is +3 to the level of all physical spell skill gems, and then the drawback is you deal no elemental damage. Replica Cold Iron Point changes that. so that you're only prevented from dealing cold damage. You can still deal lightning and you can still deal fire damage. And you have this +3 to level of all cold spell skill gems. The first place that I go to with this is to think of any cold spell skill that you can fully convert, which is any of them. And the way that you would do this is you would find a cold spell that hits frequently, and you would use it in conjunction with two other mechanics. Firstly, you would use it with the support gem Cold to Fire support. This causes a spell gem to have 50% of its cold damage converted to fire. Secondly, it also adds a lot of damage. Also, you would use it in conjunction with a 20 quality Pyre unique sapphire ring. Pyre is not the rarest ring in the world. It's not common either, but it's not rare at all, and it's very easy to source in a trade league. What it does is it causes 40% of your cold damage to be converted to fire damage. We're going to be using this with Metamorph quality, so that's going to be 48%. And so as a result, between a single Pyre and a single support gem on your cold skill, you're converting 98% of the cold damage to fire. That's all you need to do. You can afford to lose 2% damage. The reason you're going to do this, +3 to the level of all cold skill gems, is huge. Absolutely monstrously huge. And so you're going to be getting a lot of extra damage out of this. And additionally, the way that you're converting your damage will cause some explosive synergies with the unique flask Atziri's Promise, which you're probably using anyway because it's a really good damage flask. But if you are using Glacial Cascade converted to fire in this way, let's say your Glacial Cascade deals 1,000 damage. So firstly, you're dealing 1,000 physical damage. You're then going to gain up to 20% of that as extra chaos damage. So let's say that you've got a perfect roll Atziri's Flask. That's 200 chaos damage there. Then Glacial Cascade converts itself to cold damage. So you're dealing 1,000 cold damage now. And you've got your 15% of that, so that's another 150 cold damage. Another 150 damage that's being added as chaos. Then, of that 1,000 cold damage, you're converting 98% of it to fire. So you've got 980 fire damage. 15% of that is 147 extra damage. And so your total amount of chaos damage that you're getting this way is just short of 500. So this is basically making a perfectly rolled Atziri's Promise into a 50% more multiplier for the damage that you're doing. That's one of the other benefits of conversion. Additionally, if you're a Trickster, the Trickster node Harness the Void will also effectively do the same thing as Atziri's Promise and allow you to stack it further. There's definitely a cold conversion build here. I've mentioned this using Glacial Cascade, which is the best case scenario for Atziri's Promise. But even if you're not going to even if you're just using a normal cold skill like say Winter Orb, you will still benefit a lot from this cold conversion and then add it as extra chaos shenanigans that we're discussing here. So that's the second item I wanted to discuss, the Replica Cold Iron Point. Fair warning, I do think that this is a fairly rare item from the replicas. It's not in very high demand at the moment, but if a lot of people were to try and start making that, I do fear that it might become more expensive. Third, and this time we're going to go for something expensive, the Replica Nebulis. There has been a build video that's been doing the rounds on YouTube around this. Essentially, this is one of the most powerful build around me items that's ever been produced in the game, but it has a massive drawback. And so Nebulis, if you're not familiar with it, it's a unique item that drops from the Cortex. It's sort of good, and it rewards you for overcapping your resistances. The Replica Nebulis rewards you for not filling out your resistances, and it rewards you with absolutely staggering amounts of increased damage. So what you need to do here to get full value out of this, you need to find some way to survive with almost no cold resistance or fire resistance. You got to pick one of them. Maybe you can work around both, but I think most people will either go with almost no cold resist or with almost no fire resistance. One of the ways that you can do that, and it's hinted at in the flavor text of the item, is with a talisman. Specifically, the talisman being the Avian Twins talisman. That allows 50% of damage you suffer of one element to be taken as a different element instead, And if you can get it on if you can get that mod on the unique Rigwold Talisman, the Eyes of the Great Wolf, then it's 100% conversion of incoming damage. So that's one way that you can build around it. The jewel references, there's a way that you can build around this using a timeless jewel, and the armor. There's armors and there's other options that you can use as well to build around it. I will try and find the build guide that's been doing the rounds, because apparently it's excellent. I haven't watched it, and it discusses Replica Nebulis in depth. But the key shenanigans here is if you can get your cold resist down to say negative 200%, then suddenly you're gaining something like you're 275% under your maximum cold resist, and so you're going to gain 1,375% increased cold damage. This is a monumental amount of increased damage. Now this is increased damage, it's not a more multiplier, but still, you probably have maybe 500% increased damage from other sources. So this is going to roughly 1.5 your damage, and that's using one Replica Nebulis. If you're using one, you're probably going to use two. So this is one of those items that can send your damage up into the stratosphere, but comes with a very, very, very big drawback. And if you're going to try and build around it, I wish you well in finding the right way to use it. Definitely a powerful item. Next up, we're going to have a look at what was initially the big chase item of the new Replica system, and still seems to be in quite hot demand at the moment. That's the Replica Headhunter. So Replica Headhunter is an inferior copy of the original Headhunter, but it's still pretty good. It has the same stats, so 40 to 55 strength. You'll see that it says up to 66, but that's because people often use attribute quality on it, and PoE.Ninja picks those ones up wrongly. Likewise, it's got a dexterity bonus, and then it adds a lot of life. But it then has these new mods. Instead of having 20 to 30% increased damage with hits against rare monsters, you get that against magic monsters instead. Generally speaking, the ability to deal extra damage to rares is usually better than it is to magic monsters, mostly because you tend to spend more time fighting rare monsters. They're more likely to be much more durable. But then you have the killer. 20% chance to gain when you kill a magic monster, to gain its non-bloodline modifiers for 20 seconds. So Headhunter, the original, is 100% chance when you kill a rare monster to gain its modifiers for 20 seconds. So that includes the Nemesis mods. This is more powerful than it looks, but less powerful by far than the original Headhunter. So when you kill a pack of magic monsters, you're probably going to be killing 8 or 9 of them at once. And so this is going to mean that you're going to gain, on average, 1.6, 1.8 mods. These mods are pretty powerful, but they're just not as powerful as the mods that are available to rare monsters. Rare monsters have the same pool of mods as magic monsters, but when you kill a rare monster, they always have 3 mods. I believe it's always 3. And so you're gaining 3 mods 100% of the time, versus killing a pack of magic monsters where on average you might gain 1.6 or 1.8. Additionally, rare monsters have ridiculously powerful aura mods. As an example, the rare monsters that have allies are faster end up giving you something like a 50% more multiplier to attack speed and to movement speed. It's absolutely crazy. Replica Headhunter doesn't have this high-end power. However, as an inferior substitute that you can use while speed mapping, until you're able to source a Headhunter, or in place of a Headhunter if you don't think you'll ever be able to afford one, it is something that's a cool replacement. Additionally, absolutely have to love the flavor text on this. A Type Delta test subject escaped with prototype number 18. He was last seen 10 times the height of a man and crashing straight through walls. If you ever run around with Headhunter, you would know that Soul Eater, which is one of the Nemesis mods that you can inherit through that, can cause your character to grow to absolutely ridiculous sizes. And so that's just a reference to that. The other one that I want to point out whilst we're on the amulets and other accessories page is the Replica Atziri's Foible. This was teased before the league started. This is still cool. This is really powerful. It's one of those items that just does a lot in terms of its general power level, and it's something you should seriously consider using. Next up, we have the unique maps. I'm just going to mention that these exist. I haven't run either of them. There is a Replica Pillars of Arun and a Replica Porjoy's Asylum. I don't have any information on what's involved in these maps. They do seem to be the only maps. I've heard rumours of a Replica Cortex, but I've not been able to verify them, and they're not being traded at all if they exist. So I don't know anything about these maps. Probably want to try one of them at one point. Lastly, in the unique armors section. So there's a number of things that were announced prior to the league starting, but there's a couple of things that are a bit more build defining. So you have Volkuur's Guidance. Now this is an interesting one in that it allows your chaos damage to ignite. This is something that it's one of those skills that I don't think is good for many people. One of those effects, I think for most people it's not any good, but this is the sort of thing that might enable a niche build. Something that can't use other means of allowing chaos damage to ignite, like for instance Zerfi's Heart, and needs to find some alternative. And I think that Volkuur's Guidance just might be worthwhile considering. Just remember that it exists. Next up we have Replica Stampede, one of the cheaper ones again. And these keep the base item Stampedes mod that your movement speed is 150% of base value. So it's always 150% of base value. That's basically low-level movement speed boots plus a Quicksilver Flask that does not have the Adrenaline mod on it. So that's the sort of move speed that you'll be at all the time. That's pretty effective in a number of situations. It means that you can free up. You absolutely don't need a movement. Absolutely don't need a Quicksilver Flask. And so these are pretty solid. But the thing that's cool with this is that travel skills deal 80% more damage. Now, there's a number of travel skills that do surprising amounts of damage. I'm often shocked by how much damage my Flame Dash can do on a character, particularly the character that I played in the last league, which was a Fireball Ignite build, and therefore was scaling a lot of fire damage. And I'd be curious to see whether you can make a Flame Dash into a genuine offensive skill with these boots. So yeah, there's a couple of just interesting things here. I don't know if they're good or not, but they're cool. I next want to point out Replica Eternity Shroud. This is mostly inferior to the original item, but is still kind of cool. So instead of gaining physical damage as added chaos damage per shaper item equipped, sorry, instead of adding elemental damage added as extra chaos per shaper item equipped, it's physical added as extra chaos. This is stronger for some niche situations, like for instance builds that are based around Blade Vortex and dealing poison damage. And ultimately I think that if you're playing a poison damage Blade Vortex build, you might want to consider Replica Eternity Shroud as an endgame alternative to what you're probably using at the moment, which would be 2 Cold Iron points. Not the Replica Cold Iron points, but the original one. Additionally, the trigger level 20 shade form when hit on this is an interesting mechanic. It has an extraordinarily long cooldown, 45 seconds. But what it does, when it triggers, it gives you 3 seconds of immunity to physical damage. Now you can try and scale the skill effect duration on that, but it's still going to be difficult to get it to anything meaningful. The key thing that allows you to do is basically to make some big mistakes and survive them. The best case that I can think of for it is when you set off one of the Legion encounters that has a whole lot of archers in it, or when you rush through specific doors in the Heist League, and suddenly you have a huge number of volleys of arrows coming at you from a whole bunch of different sources. This might allow you to make some big mistakes and survive them. That's the reason that I'm pointing this item out. It's kind of cool. I don't think it's anywhere near as good as the original. The last item I want to point out is one that I do think is genuinely very strong, and it is a chase item of sorts, and that's the Replica Farrul's Fur. So, very similar to the original Farrul's Fur, you need to have aspect of the cat somewhere on your build. You can get that by crafting it onto a rare item that you're already using. It takes up one. I think it's a suffix slot. It's definitely an affix slot somewhere. and you can craft that pretty easily, although you do need to kill Farrul first of the planes to do so. Now, what you're going to get with this is that you'll have a larger, it's quite a solid piece of armor defensively, it's got life on it, but then it has these interesting mods. So plus 2 seconds to cat's agility duration, aspect of the cat reserves no mana, and gain up to your maximum number of frenzy and endurance charges when you gain cat's agility. Now, with the aspect of the cat, you'll swap between cat's stealth and cat's agility on roughly a 12-second total cycle. So this is going to give you full frenzy charges and full endurance charges most of the time. Whatever your build's maximum is, you will mostly have them at full, and if you invest slightly in increasing the duration of your charges, you will get to actually have full uptime on that. Lastly, have Onslaught when you have cat's agility. So you have Onslaught most of the time, but not all of the time. So essentially, as an overall package, you're looking at 100 maximum life, a decent amount of armor and evasion, and most of the time you will have full uptime of frenzy charges and endurance charges at your character's maximum. That makes for a very powerful piece of body armor, and is something that I think can be used on a wide variety of builds. And really, in a lot of ways, it just like the original Farrul's Fur. So if we bring up the original Farrul's Fur, which is very similar, but grants phasing when you've got cat's stealth, and fills out your power and frenzy charges rather than your endurance charges. It's an all-around high power item, very, very strong, and something that pretty much anyone can use. Anyways, I'm going to leave it there. I'm sure that there's lots of other replica items, and I do recommend that you just have a look through them all. Browse them just by coming to poe.ninja. I didn't, for instance, touch on any of the unique jewels. Those exist as well. There's replica unique jewels. There's replica primordial might, which is a transformative golem jewel that is going to be very bad for builds that have used primordial might in the past, but may empower something new and different. There's lots of things to have a look at. But if you've got any comments or questions, definitely fire away below. Otherwise, I'll leave it there. I hope you have a good one.